Star Wars The Clone Wars premiered on Cartoon Network on October 3rd, 2008, and absolutely blew my college freshman mind and changed the Star Wars universe forever. This set off a truly remarkable 5 years of Star Wars, and very specifically the 4 years of Clone Wars before the next seismic shift in Star Wars. This is the moment in time before Disney and after the last Star Wars. And I'm going to reflect on that time and really just all of the Clone Wars in general. The reason the Clone Wars are essential entertaining entry into the official Star Wars canon is copious. But I wanted to boil it down to the 5 main pillars of what I consider to have made Clone Wars just so special. And just to kick things off right away, let's talk about something that we really take for granted today. Every week there's new Star Wars. Up until the Clone Wars, Star Wars on the screen took 3 years to come out. And let's not forget what older fans call the dark times, the time between the end of the original trilogy in 1983 and the rebirth of the expanded universe in 1991. This was before my time, but imagine, if you can, this time period where it just took years for any content of any kind to come out. It was 16 years between Return of the Jedi and The Phantom Menace. And during the prequel era, it was 3 years between movies. And personally, I was 9 when The Phantom Menace came out, and 14 when Revenge of the Sith came out. That time of a kid's life feels like 20 years. But when the Clone Wars began, it was hard to believe we were getting Star Wars every week. Now, yes, there was time in between seasons, but it was only months. It wasn't years. Because it was every week, you didn't have to like every episode. If you didn't like this week, just wait a few days and you can try again next week. I do think we take advantage of this, but also at the same time, I do wonder if Star Wars puts out too much content. But specifically in this time, it was a godsend. And as time goes on, that's less precious. But something that is always going to be precious, no matter what happens, it's George Lucas's last entry into the canon. Though the series had many writers and Dave Filoni at the helm, George Lucas was an integral part of production from the beginning. Retiring was a long time coming for George, and let's be honest, Revenge of the Sith was the swan song. Clone Wars was the perfect way for him to flesh out the Star Wars myth before passing the baton on to the next generation. From finally explaining the wills of the Force to giving us an in-depth look at youngling training, the Clone Wars gave Lucas the platform to get some last few details off his chest before moving on. There is a lot of talk about George being forced out when talking about the Disney era of Star Wars, but go back to this time, he says constantly, "It's time for me to retire. I'm retired." There's paparazzi chasing him and he's going, "I'm retired." Now, did he mean it? I don't know, but he did sell it. It is passed on. And as of right now, this is the last George Lucas canon that we have in Star Wars. I also think what this did was give Dave Filoni some of the George Lucas juice. Dave Filoni is the protege, and that is because of George Lucas. And also, of all the canon we get, most of it affects the original trilogy and the sequel trilogy. But thanks to George, we were steeped in building out the prequel trilogy. And one of its greatest assets was treating Anakin Skywalker as a real, true hero. Despite what the sequel-bashing prequel meme accounts would have you think, the prequels are polarizing. They are not as universally beloved as some people would think. They are bashed the same way the sequel trilogy is bashed. I stand by them all for the most part, but something I have to admit about the prequels, it did not show Anakin Skywalker the hero. The prequels focused on his young innocence and then his downfall. But the Clone Wars This finally gave us tales of the legendary Jedi hero. It finally gave us the best star pilot in the galaxy, the cunning warrior, and the good friend. But it's not just Anakin it fleshed out. It essentially completed the prequel trilogy. It not only helped Anakin's character, but the whole prequel story as a whole. It gives more context to Anakin's fall, the actual war that is the Clone War, with all of its horrors, heroism, hypocrisy, the arrogance of the Jedi Order, Sidious's evil plot, the betrayal, the clones, the politics, and I could just keep going out. It fleshes out all of these things that are central to the prequel trilogy. The show was great at giving more necessary plot and character development to the prequel movies. This is just a theory, but I think George probably didn't realize how big of a story it would need to be when he started the prequels. But this thing goes in threes, he couldn't expand it. And by the end of the 3 movies, there was just not enough to tell the story, but luckily, we have the Clone Wars. But I think the truly most important thing that the Clone Wars gave us is Ahsoka Tano. You've probably heard this before, but there's this quote that went around, especially around this time. I was very skeptical of Ahsoka's character. Now, I love her. This was true for almost everyone, including myself. Most fans of Clone Wars reminiscing begin with this statement. And it seems so silly now, but think back before the character development. She was a 14-year-old calling the Chosen One Sky Guy. I mean, come on, of course we were a little skeptical. I mean, we weren't even sure Anakin should have an apprentice at any point. And of course, we were wrong. Ahsoka gave more reason for Anakin's distrust in the Jedi Order and eventual turn. But Ahsoka became so much more than a plot device to propel Anakin's journey. She became a great character in her own right. We were her experience in the Jedi Order with her. Like us, she knew the Jedi were supposed to be and represent. And like us, she eventually saw what it truly was. And call me a liberal cuck, but I am glad that it was one of the first editions of a well-developed woman in Star Wars who had a lightsaber. It also added Ashley Eckstein to the Star Wars family. We now live in a time where we've seen her face off against Darth Vader, a world where she stands next to Luke Skywalker. It's fun to think back to these years where she worked her way into our hearts. This character has done so much for Star Wars, so much for representation, so much for fandom. Thank the maker. Ahsoka lives.